welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today on our webinar about how to spot the signs of domestic abuse. We're also going to touch on breakup and divorce in the workplace because they're really closely interwoven. My name is Sara Davison, best known as the Divorce Coach. And also I'm joined by Rob here, Rob Gray. Oh, I was joined by Rob Gray. He is my commercial director for the business, and he's also in charge of working with businesses as well. Now, there is a chat group, so please do pop your questions in the chat. I will come to them at the end. I want to give you as much value as possible today, so I am going to be going through any questions that you ask me, and we'll keep those to the end, but I will go through those. And Rob's back again. Welcome, Rob. I just introduced you while you're off, and we're going to go through the questions in the chat at the end. So yes, I will start my presentation and then we'll come back on camera at the end to take questions. But yeah, feel free, please put your questions in because I really, really want to get through as much as I possibly can with you. Okay, let's see. Oh, here we go. Right. So my name is Sara Davison. As I said, I'm best known as the Divorce Coach. I know it's a really catchy job title, but I am a twice best-selling author of Uncoupling, you can see there, and another book called The Split. I'm also a podcast host of Heartbreak to Happiness, which is top charting in its niche area. I'm also a social media influencer and a go-to media expert. So I do a lot of media, TV, radio, talking about breakup, divorce, and domestic abuse. And probably most importantly for me, I'm the patron of the Dash charity, which is a domestic abuse charity. Now, how did I get into this line of work? I know the Divorce Coach isn't the best or the most catchy job title, but it does do what it says on the tin. I have been in personal development and self-help for nearly 30 years now and been coaching for that amount of time. When I was 30, I met my husband, and I felt was my soulmate. He was everything I dreamed of, and we got married after a couple of years and had a son. When my son was 1, I realized that not only did my husband not want to be married to me, but he was madly in love with somebody else. Never helps when they're 12 years younger, never helps when they're stunningly beautiful. And it definitely didn't help when I found out a couple of months later that she was pregnant. So we also worked together. We had a global business. We had an office in London and an office in Sydney, Australia, and we had almost 200 staff. So it wasn't just a small breakup. I guess the ripple effect was massive. I lost my husband, the father of my son, but also my business partner and who I thought was my soulmate. And I think when you go through that, and I imagine that some of you have gone through some pretty tough breakups yourself. I know most people go through heartbreak at least once in their life. It is a life-altering moment, especially if you're married with someone and also if you're working with them as well, obviously. If you have children, you also have so many ties. So I was absolutely devastated. I didn't see it coming, and it hit me like a freight train. And it took me a long time to pick myself up off the bathroom floor. I was doing a lot of that ugly crying. I was in a lot of shock. I couldn't quite believe it was happening to me. And as I was catapulted out of my relationship, I also realized that it was actually very toxic. And that was something that I hadn't realized, particularly when I was in it, which is why it is so very difficult for people to spot the signs of any kind of domestic abuse, because it's very hard for people in those relationships to understand it themselves. So let's look at why relationships end. The main reasons are adultery, abuse, incompatibility, boredom. So that's more sort of fizzling out over a period of time. With children, we quite often see that people break up after 3 years, which is just after having the kids. It can actually put a big pressure, obviously, for those of you who've got kids, you'll know, on any relationship, however healthy. Different expectations. I think often when we're younger, if you meet young, then expectations, you can kind of work with those, but over time, they can grow apart. Mental health issues, money and finances are obviously up there, especially at the moment. I'm seeing the cost of living crisis being a real issue for many of our clients. Any kind of other stress that goes on will put that impact onto the relationship. Addiction, again, very difficult to live with an addict and manage that, incredibly difficult. And ultimately a lack of communication. And I think that's what a lot of these things come down to, and why they finally don't work in the end. It's down to a lack of communication, because maybe you want to avoid conflict. Certain of us don't like conflict, so we'll avoid it, which actually means that problems get shoved underneath the carpet and they stay there. But what happens is resentment builds. And when resentment builds, that's when the relationship starts to fall apart. And generally that comes down to that lack of communication. So what is the impact of breakup and divorce? Well, it is a huge impact. And the interesting thing is that it happens to everyone. I mean, the divorce rate currently stands at 56%. That's huge, 56%. I know that before COVID and after COVID, we had a huge rise in divorce, about 20% increase in divorce. And I was on GB News talking about this a lot during that period, about how and why the divorce rate just after COVID had catapulted high. And that's obviously because a lot of us were stuck in relationships where, you know, when you're, even if you've got a good relationship, and this was actually one of the saddest things to see, that healthy relationships could not survive just being stuck in those four walls with someone for that long period of time. Because the dynamic of a lot of relationships are that you have your independence and your freedom and you go to work. And when you're stuck with that person 24/7, it's not that you don't love them, it's just that that relationship disintegrated. But there was obviously a big increase in awareness of how much domestic abuse and toxic relationships there are out there. And again, the charity that I'm the patron of, we saw a 300% increase in calls to the helplines when people were stuck at home with their abuser. Now, you know, an abuser in a family, it is predominantly a female issue. Females are predominantly the victims of abuse, but that's around 80%. But 20% are men as well. And actually in my private clinic, I have over 50% male clients dealing with this right now. It happens to a lot of men as well as women, and maybe they find it a lot harder to report. It's what the stats show as well. So it could even be higher than that 20%. So it isn't just for women. What we find at the end of a breakup, usually one person is a lot further down the line than the other as well, which can be hard to watch. So, you know, if someone announces they're leaving you, like, for example, my husband, he was a lot further down the line than me. It was a total shock on me. But for him, he'd already made his decision. He was happy with it, and he was in love with somebody else. So quite often the impact of breakup and divorce is very different depending on which partner you're talking to. So let's look at the different types of relationship breakup. There's the healthy relationship breakup versus the toxic one. And a lot of people ask me, Sara, what is the difference? How do you know if this is an abusive relationship? How do you know if if a breakup is toxic or not? Now, obviously with a healthy relationship, and healthy, I mean that you're both healthy and neither of you are abusive or controlling. And we'll break down what abuse is in a moment. But if you're both healthy, then when you're going through a breakup, yes, there will be conflict. We can't avoid that. There is going to be conflict. You're going to argue over who gets the piano and how many children, how often you're going to see the kids, and who's going to get the dog at the weekends. You will have conflict. So you can still have a healthy relationship with conflict. In fact, it's healthy to have some form of conflict. But you ultimately want a fair resolution at the end of the day. Both of you are working towards, yeah, okay, maybe I get more of this, you get a bit more of that, but we both walk away. It's ultimately fair. That does not exist. Compromise, the word fair, does not exist in a toxic relationship breakdown. What that partner is looking for is causing maximum suffering and total annihilation. Now, it's very difficult to understand if you haven't been in an abusive relationship. Which is why I really appreciate you coming today to this webinar, because I know how difficult it is to spot the signs of abuse. And we're going to cover that as well in a lot more detail. But ultimately, this is the difference, okay? If one person there's no compromise, there is no trying to work out, and that's why mediation is very hard for an abusive relationship, because there is no fair compromise. And mediation is a tick box usually before you end up in court that everyone has to go through. With a healthy dynamic, you can sit around the table with a mediator and work out what is the best solution for us. But when it's toxic, there is no compromise. So that becomes another game, another tool to abuse in the perpetrator's toolkit. So mediation is really not a good idea unless you look at certain forms of mediation, like hybrid mediation, which allows you to have a lawyer present, you're in separate rooms and the mediator isn't sharing information backwards and forwards. But not every lawyer, family lawyer, will use that form of mediation. So you have to go to someone who's specifically trained in it. So let's look at what is abuse. Well, the government definition is this: any incident or pattern of incidents of controlling or threatening behavior, violence or abuse, which can be psychological, physical, sexual, financial, or emotional. So we used to call it domestic violence. I don't know if you remember, that's what we used to call domestic abuse, not even that long ago. But we've changed it here in the UK, and we're hoping that the states will follow. Usually they're ahead of us on these things, but actually with domestic abuse support, the UK is one of the leading countries, if not the leading, on the support we offer. And it's between those aged 16 or over who are or have been intimate partners or family members, regardless of gender or sexuality. So that's how the government define it. And as I said, it's not just violence. It is now widely recognized to include all the other types of abuse. And this is what actually we see more of there, in our clinics. I set up a coaching school back in 2018. After my breakup, I decided I wanted to help people cope better with any kind of breakup. I wasn't going to let this pain that I was dealing with just be for me. And that's where my mission became a reality, really. It was, I'm going to figure out a way through this. I'm going to create tools and techniques that get me through this, because there really wasn't anything available. And then I'm going to share this with people all over the world. And now we're doing that with hundreds of thousands of people. And what I found is that these tools to navigate toxic relationships there just isn't anything like this out there. And people dealing with abuse really need this as a lifeline, because it's very isolating. So how do you spot the signs of a toxic relationship? Now, you might remember at the beginning, I said, I didn't realize I was in an abusive relationship. And that's very, very true. So it's very hard for somebody outside of a relationship to be able to spot if the person in it isn't willing to accept or doesn't understand, because maybe they just don't know any different. So the signs are gaslighting. Now, gaslighting is a very overused term at the moment, but it means confusing behavior. So, for example, somebody saying something happened in a certain way, whereas it didn't. But they try and convince you that it did, or making you doubt yourself or question yourself. Lies, lying all the time, to the point where you think, well, no one would possibly lie about something that big. You just wouldn't lie about friends and family, or where you were educated, or just how much money you have, maybe, or anything really. The lying is continuous. A slow erosion of confidence. This often happens, and you'll be able to see this with that particular individual that's in the relationship. Maybe they were the life and soul. Maybe they were very sort of confident, or at least, self-assured. But over time, their confidence will be eroded. And that's really, really important to notice, that slow erosion of confidence means that has a ripple effect on the rest of your life, not just in a relationship, but everywhere. You'll begin to doubt yourself because you'll be belittled. There'll be name calling. They'll say you're wrong about a lot of things. They'll rarely give you credit for anything, because making you feel good doesn't serve them. Quite often people in these relationships are living a double life, because what it looks like to the outside world is very different to what it's like behind closed doors. Very, very different. The abuser can often look like the life and soul of the party, be super loving, and in front of people, a real sort of show person. So they will make people think that they're a very loving partner and great fun and very caring. It's very different when the doors are closed. So again, this can be emotional abuse by just not caring, not looking after your emotions, not looking after how you feel. It can be verbal abuse. As I said, put downs. Sometimes these put downs are not that obvious. I mean, I had a client the other day who said, Sara, yeah, it wasn't that bad. He used to say things like, oh, it's great that you've put that dress on today and it hasn't got any sleeves because, you've got little chubby arms, but good for you for wearing the dress. And she said, so he used to compliment me for being brave. And I was like, that's not a compliment. It's not a compliment. So ultimately, again, looking at how that works is really important. Lack of personal freedom. They will be restricting your freedom. So they will be looking at isolating you, cutting you off from other people, not letting you see the people you necessarily want to see. But it might be also choosing what you wear, controlling where you go and who you spend your time with. But again, it won't happen up front. What happens with abuse is at the beginning, they show up and there's a lot of love bombing and it looks amazing and you feel $1,000,000. They make you feel very special. There's a lot of promises of sort of, I'm going to keep you safe. You'll never have to worry again. You'll always be loved. But actually, over a period of time, then that starts to change. So they never show up on day one as they do on the last day because we've run a mile, right? But actually with this, what we want to do is we're doing it differently. We're actually saying this works on a very insidious way. So they make us feel $1,000,000. They get us in, they make us feel fantastic. And then over time, that kind of diminishes the confidence and the self-esteem. Also, financial control. Many of you will have seen that financial control is an issue there. So what will happen is that they will be watching what you spend. So really controlling. And it might be sort of having, I mean, I have a client at the moment who has to take home her receipts of anything she spends and not just give them to her partner, but she has to justify why she spent what she spent as well. Also, walking on eggshells is a big thing as well. So constantly double thinking, overthinking, wondering what whether when the next outburst might come. The important thing here, guys, to remember is that it's not your fault. If you're in an abusive relationship, it is never, ever your fault. And I think if someone comes to you asking for help, it's really important. I know it's difficult because sometimes to the outside world, the abuser can look like the life and soul of the party. But actually, the reality is they're not who they seem to be. And behind closed doors, that person that's come to you, if they're brave enough to come to you, will be dealing with a lot. So it's never their fault. Whilst in a lot of ways we can enable it by not speaking out early on and not saying this isn't acceptable and walking away, it's never our fault if you end up in one of those relationships. So how do you signpost and safeguard? Because if someone comes to you in the office and says, help me, I'm in this situation, first of all, if it's an emergency, 999. If they're in physical danger, and then do call 999. How effective that is, I have called 999 on behalf of a client before, and it took them 12 days to get there. So, you have to be very persistent with this. But if they are in danger, that is the advice to call 999. Also, make sure they are registered with their local domestic abuse charity because they understand exactly how to do a risk assessment on your employee and will look after them. And obviously, we've got Women's Aid, got Mankind, who specialise with men, and the National Domestic Abuse Hotline as well, they can call. But obviously, make sure it's safe for them to do any of these things because if they're watching their phone's been tracked or watched, or their computer's been watched, or they're listening into phone calls, then it may not be safe for them to do that. So again, this is all things to take into consideration, or maybe they do it when they're not at home on a different phone, just to get the advice. When people are in the workplace, often that's one of the safest places for them to be. So what is the ripple effect of a breakup? Well, the reason I'm bringing breakups is quite often people are either thinking about getting out or they are getting out of a toxic relationship. If they're still in it, then it's incredibly difficult. I don't know if you realize, but the actual statistics in the UK, and they're very similar around the world. When I speak in America or Australia, they're actually very, very similar. The homicide rate, so the murder rate for after is shocking. 30% of domestic homicides happen within 3 months of separation from a relationship, within 3 months of separation, which is the reason why is as people start to step out of these domestically abusive relationships, the abuser is losing control, and what they want is control. They need that control. So actually, even, and the shocking thing about those 30% of homicides, over 82% of them have never had any physical violence before. So it's not like they had a little bit and then they came back in. They didn't have any abuse, any violence before. So emotional, psychological. I mean, sometimes those scars are deeper than the physical scars, to be honest. So we can't judge which is worse, to be honest. But it's interesting that homicide may come when there's never been any physical violence before. So the ripple effect of a breakup will impact so much: safety, security, but also ability to parent, and especially ability to show up to work. So how do breakups impact you in the workplace? Well, they show up. There's so many things. I mean, obviously, if you're dealing with any kind of breakup or divorce or domestic abuse, it's going to impact your ability to focus, your ability to lead a team. It's going to affect your basic functions, your thought processes, your decision making, your mental health, and your physical health. Physical health can be a real thing as well. I mean, stress and what it does to your body, it can ravage your body, especially domestic abuse. It also put pressure on your family relationships, an emotional toll as well. Now, I'm part of the Parents Promise, and this is an organisation that was set up back, I think it was about 2 years ago now in January. We did a campaign to raise awareness of the impact of breakup and divorce on the workplace. A lot of people don't know how much it impacts. So these are the stats that we discovered from our research. 90% of employees said that separation affected their ability to work. 95% said it impacted their mental health in the workplace. 74% worked less well or less efficiently. 39% took time off work. 12% stopped working altogether. And only 9% of employees said that their employers had a specific policy for separation. Now, the Harvard Business Journal as well did a lot of research on this, which I find really interesting, because it's actually so shocking that the impact that it has. So it reduces your employee productivity by up to 40%, and not for just the year of the breakup, but for 3 years. So the year it's all falling apart, which I guess we can understand, right? As you're sort of finding out that things aren't great, or you're under pressure and it's fizzling out, or you know your partner's had an affair. And then the year of the breakup, as it all falls apart. And then also the year after, as you're trying to put things back together. And this is interesting because, you know, obviously there's a huge impact on lifestyle. So you're separating two lifestyles. So you're probably, in most cases, moving home. You're probably not seeing the kids as much. Your routine has changed. So all that impacts the workplace and reduces productivity by up to 40% for 3 years. And the knock-on effects on co-workers and line managers is up to 4% as well. So we don't quite often keep it to ourselves. We might be talking to people at the water cooler. In fact, I was talking at the Work at Wellbeing show, I think that's what it was called, in Birmingham a few months ago. And I was doing one of the fireside chats, and an HR manager asked me a question. And she said that she had someone coming into the office every day, and he was, she said, but he comes in every morning, he brings me a coffee, he comes into my office and he talks about what's going on with his breakup. She said, and that's great, and I've been supporting him. And then through the rest of the day, you know, he goes out and you can see him working his way around the office, talking to people about what's going on. And whilst we really want to help him and really want to support him, you know, is starting to impact, you know, morale in the office. And also we're all kind of thinking, when is he going to get over this? And it's really interesting because I know that by listening and being empathetic and allowing him that time to speak to her every day, that was a very caring thing to do, which made him feel very safe. But actually, what we need to do, and there's specific tools that we work with to help employees get back to work, increase their productivity, and stop telling their sad story. It's not to take away from the fact that some of these stories are incredibly sad and very traumatic for a lot of them, but talking about it keeps you stuck, because your body doesn't know the difference between something happening now and something happening in the past. And even if they are going through a tough breakup, repeating what happened a week ago or 2 weeks ago or a month ago or even this morning, you're reliving that pain. So important tools and techniques to get under your belt. 23% of workers who went through a divorce or separation had to take sick or unpaid leave. In 2021, employees seeking separation and divorce advice was up 23% year on year. And that was actually from Zurich, I think, who said that calls to their helplines. And for just under 1 in 10, it resulted in them leaving the company altogether, gone. So what can you as employers do to help people going through that? Well, there are lots and lots of things. And obviously, Rob and I would love to talk to you about these things in more detail. But some of them would be flexibility around working hours, because I said it has a ripple effect on their entire life, as we know. So there are going to be times where they can't come to the office as easily, or maybe the childcare arrangements aren't as they used to be, or they get let down. And again, in a toxic relationship, you can guarantee that the pain points, which are finance and children, will be pulled on. I'm going to talk about that in a minute as well in a lot more detail. So having flexibility, if they're going to court, do they have to take holiday for that? It's kind of demoralizing and awful to have to take a holiday to go to court. But again, it depends what kind of business you have and whether that's viable financially. And also putting tools and sort of helping them with sort of flexibility is great. Having places they can go for time out and agreeing they can take breaks if they get over emotional, all great. But actually, where we come in is we give them the tools to rehabilitate so they can maintain their productivity and they can get their productivity back where it needs to be, but also manage those emotions and dial down those difficult ones. I'll come on to more of that in a moment. Okay, so I want to talk more on domestic abuse now. So this is how domestic abuse impacts your business. Now, a lot of people don't know this because a lot of people think that domestic abuse just happens to other people. I felt that domestic abuse would never happen to somebody like me, so I couldn't possibly be experiencing that in my relationship. But 21% of full-time employees will have experienced domestic abuse or violence. 21% of your workforce. 74% of them will have suffered harassment at their workplace from their abuser. Over 1 in 10 report that the abuse continues in the workplace. In 81% of cases, that's through abusive emails and phone calls. Now, so whilst they're working, their abuser, their partner, wherever they are, will be contacting them, will be intimidating them while they're trying to work. £14 billion is lost to businesses each year through decreased productivity, time off work, lost wages, and sick pay as a result of domestic abuse. And 47% of those experiencing domestic abuse say their perpetrator turned up at their workplace or stalked them outside of their place of work. Now, these statistics are from IDA, and IDA is a charity which all companies, all businesses can register for free. So free, and they give you support and resources on how to handle domestic abuse as well. And we're one of their listed resources, providing coaching for people dealing with domestic abuse. So how does it impact employees in your workplace? Well, 9 out of 10 workers will say that it impacted their performance, obviously, with over half of those having to take time off work as a result of abuse, and nearly half of them were late to work. So they're not going to be on time, and a lot of them are going to have to take time off. A lot of the times I'm dealing with someone at the moment whose partner is continually sabotaging her laptop. So while she works from home, he's damaging her equipment. It's also very common that they can't get there because their tires are let down, or there's a problem with the car, or the car keys have gone missing. These sort of tactics are very common when you're in a domestic abuse relationship. So it might be that they just don't, that can look like to an employer that they don't care, that they're just lazy, they're not punctual. But if you're in a domestic abuse relationship, behind the scenes, a lot of things can be happening that will make you look like that, because that's their goal, to cause you maximum pain. 1 in 50 women actually just lose their jobs as a consequence of domestic abuse. And this is quite scary as well. Over a quarter of colleagues have been threatened or harmed by a colleague's abuser. Over a quarter. That's huge. that it's impacting other members of staff. Now, how this kind of plays out very often is that they don't, if you take the sort of, say, a scenario where it's a male abuser and a female victim, I've had so many clients dealing with being told in the workplace they can't speak to men, they've got to dress in a certain way. So it is impacting. And if they're ever at an event, or they their partner finds out they've been in meetings even with this person, even if there's nothing going on whatsoever, that will then lead to harassment and being threatened or even harmed by their partner. 90% of those experiencing domestic abuse said that it created conflict and tension with colleagues. Very often they won't admit to it being abuse. It's not like they've come out and said it's abuse, because still there's a huge stigma around it. And a lot of people don't really understand it either. They may just think that maybe they are being, that maybe their partner is a bit jealous and they have to behave in a certain way. It all comes down to the controlling behaviors that they're dealing with. So how do you spot the signs of abuse in your employees? As I said, it is really hard if you've never been in an abusive relationship yourself to spot the signs. It is hard, okay? I get it. And you can't be experts in everything, right? So that's where we come in. But this is going to give you some ideas of what to look for. So walking on eggshells with their partner. So maybe you don't meet them very often, or a big telltale sign is they act very differently around them. So maybe that their partner isn't around, that when they're around, they act, maybe they're very shy, they don't say much, they're quite sort of clingy with that partner. So again, if they alter their behavior, if you do meet their partner, then that could be a telltale sign. Maybe you're confused by their partner's behavior. Maybe they're gaslighting, that confusing behavior. And the rabbit holes are it's like a phrase I sort of created to describe the confusion that they create by almost throwing sort of grenades and into like a rabbit warren. So instead of, they'll say something that isn't true or that is offensive, and you'll be thinking, gosh, why did they say that? I know that's not true, or that's not right. And they'll be going round and round in circles in their heads trying to figure out why that was happening, and chasing down the rabbit hole trying to figure it out, rather than looking at it for what it is, a tactic of abuse, which is designed to cause this confusion and absolute chaos, like a grenade's gone off. Everyone's sort of reeling and chasing around trying to figure out why, and is this true, and what was the real purpose, and why would they have said this? You might notice an erosion of self-confidence and self-esteem. That is the inevitable impact of abuse over time. An increase in self-doubt, struggling to make decisions or even trust their instinct on anything. I mean, anything, like what to have for lunch, things like that as well. But if you're in a workplace, definitely making big decisions, that can have a massive impact on their ability to do that. Isolation. Because one of the abusive tactics is to cut people off from their support system. So they maybe are not allowed to attend social events. They might not say they're not allowed, but maybe there's always an excuse why they can't come and they've got to dash home. Leading a double life, the relationship, as I said, could look really good from the outside, but very different behind closed doors, which again is very difficult then to mention to anyone in the workplace that you are struggling, because everyone thinks your partner's so amazing. Lack of financial independence. So maybe that you notice that they're having to justify their spending, or they're nervous about spending money. A lack of personal freedom, meaning that they have to get approval from their partner all the time, and maybe they're fearful of just making the smallest decisions. Lack of trusting their own intuition, and this can show up very much with negative self-talk, putting themselves down. And also, if they tolerate unacceptable behavior from others, it shows that they've got low boundaries, and maybe that's because they have very low boundaries at home because they've been eroded over time. Okay. Now, if you know them really well, so like if you know them maybe outside of the work environment, there may be other things that you notice. So they might change their appearance to please their partner. They might have lost interest in some of the hobbies and activities they used to enjoy. They're nervous, or they act very differently around their partner. This is very common. Their partner causes awkward or embarrassing situations for them. But in those situations, they'll always take the blame for them. Okay, they won't let their partners suffer, because we're generally people pleasers who want to help, and we don't just want to smooth over any conflict. They might comment on their partner's sudden change of moods, because they can be in a great mood and then whammo, something changes and suddenly it's really, really difficult. Do they need to let their partner know where they are at all times? It's another really interesting sign as well. Maybe they're being tracked on their phone or a tracker on their car. I know it sounds a bit kind of like something out the movies, but this is what actually really does happen. Trackers on cars, even just having them find your phone on and watching where you are. If they're not allowed to speak to certain people, there's restrictions on how they behave, what they wear, what they spend. Now, this is an interesting one. Are they hyper-vigilant with their children? Now, this is often misread as an overprotective parent. If someone can explain to me what an overprotective parent is, then go ahead. I think that all parents should be very protective of their children. But if your child has an abuser as a parent, that is going to make you extremely nervous about how they are when they're with that parent. It could be, emotional abuse carries many scars as well. And so again, the physical and the emotional, they come hand in hand many times, but emotional abuse is incredibly damaging for children. And so the victim of abuse, the parent, the healthy parent, will want to protect their kids. So they may appear hypervigilant with their own kids. And if you've noticed bruises or injuries, usually abusers will bruise or injure in places that can be easily covered up and not shown, because they don't want to be caught. This is usually behind closed doors. So I'm going to come to your questions. So I have 20 minutes to go through it, but I just want to explain a little bit about what we do. So because of my experience and having gone through domestic abuse and a horrendous divorce, and understanding the difference of how you get dragged through the family courts, and often that becomes state-sanctioned abuse because the lawyers become the mouthpiece for the abuse, and also quite often the barristers and the judges and any experts involved. I understand how difficult that is. So my mission is to help other people going through those challenges and help them to not let this completely annihilate their life as the abuser wants it to. My motto very early on, when I was being dragged through hideous court appearances and being bullied by all sorts of different people, to give up what was rightfully mine in the divorce settlement, and not go to work, and basically lose everything I'd worked hard to achieve by that age in my life. My motto is, screw you, watch this. And that was something that came from pain. And I decided that I was never going to let other people suffer the way I suffered. So by creating a toolkit of transformational coaching techniques that are specific to breakup, divorce, and domestic abuse, my coaches in my training in my school and on my coaching hub, which is my elite coaches on a tech platform that we've created, we specialize in getting your employees the help and support they need. They will feel listened to, they will find their tribe with us. We understand what they've been through. Most of us are survivors or have worked for many years with survivors in different roles. We will take them by the hand and help them not only understand and get more clarity about what abuse is and how they got into it, so they can hone their radar so they're not going to repeat these patterns, but we also give them tools, proven tools and techniques that will help them dial down those negative emotions so they can show up for meetings, they can maintain their productivity, they know what to do when it gets really tough in the workplace and they can't, and they're overwhelmed by emotions. We will show them how to navigate that. So we have an international accredited team of coaches. We have a tech platform that your employees can access anonymously from your intranet. And there they can access all our resources. A lot of one of my books, I've put it on there for free. My videos, my blogs, some of my TV shows, my articles I've written in the press. So they can get a lot of their questions answered on there. But also we offer group coaching support, 8 sessions a week for them. They can join, find their tribe and other people dealing with this kind of situation as well from all over the world, and get support from my accredited coaches. And if they want a more tailored approach, a fast track approach to recovery, then they can also sign up for one-to-one sessions and pick their coach from a menu of very diverse, different types of coaches, specializing in all sorts of backgrounds of domestic abuse and breakups and divorce, to help that particular person, whether it's issues with children, issues with mental health, issues with addiction, all sorts of different backgrounds and communities. We also do offer training, breakup, divorce, and domestic abuse companion accreditations for mental health first aiders or your HR team to do more of a deep dive into what is abuse, how does it happen, how you can spot the signs, and how you can help your employees through breakup, divorce, and domestic abuse. And I think one of the important things we offer is support groups for those mental health first aiders that do our training, so that if someone does come in with any really tough things, because you will be hearing tough things with this particular kind of training that you probably are not used to hearing, we will support you through that. So you can come on those groups, you can talk to one of our accredited coaches, you can share how you're feeling and get coaching for you, but you can also get advice on how to best help that employee in the workplace. And also, I often run domestic abuse trainings and webinars for staff and employees, directors, it depends. So very, very flexible to help. A couple of employee testimonials. And I think one of the most powerful things from this is that here Sarah talks, we work with some big companies. I have changed the names, but not of the companies, of the employees, but having this provided through work has made me feel more valued and supported by my company, and enabled me to channel my personal worries into a constructive process, which in turn has helped me to continue to function and enjoy my job. Tokyo Marine Kiln, I always look forward to our sessions, and I've been telling everyone at the agency how valuable they are to me and how grateful I am to my company for providing this free benefit. So you can see there's a whole circular, it helps with employee well-being, but it also helps your bottom line from keeping these members of staff, important members of staff, in the office or able to function. So if you'd like to find out more, do reach out to us. I'm going to answer some of your questions now, but that's my email. And there's also rob@saradavison.com as well. I'm going to stop sharing now. Rob, are there any questions there in the chat for me? Oh, we can't hear you, Rob. So I'm going to go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, no specific questions yet. We've had lots of people introduce themselves and tell their stories, which is fantastic. So thank you for that. But no, let's just fire away with any questions anybody has.
Well, there's some in here, are there? Oh, wow. Okay. Wow, mental health first aider, Nick, welfare manager, domestic violence champion, and been with my company for 33 years. Gosh, well done. Divorced twice, been abused by my second wife physically and emotionally. She was a narcissist. Wow, been in debt, have a great partner now, in a great place. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm glad you've been able to turn that around.
Yes. So Sara, we've now got questions coming in on the Q&A. So
okay.
From Deborah has asked, how do you start the question if you're worried about a member of staff?
Yeah.
Or start the conversation even. Sorry, that was also Deborah.
Yeah, how do you start the conversation? I mean, it's a really difficult one to start because everybody is different and everybody is going to react differently. So it obviously you're going to know, hopefully, this member of staff, you're going to know their personality. I think asking questions, just, are you okay? Is there anything you'd like to share? I've noticed you've not been feeling yourself. And just opening up. It's very hard. We never tell people or suggest they might be in a toxic relationship, because that can be met with usually quite a negative response. So it's really just creating an environment where they feel open to speak. What we find is if they know that you guys have support for that, then they'll access it anonymously. If they know that someone in the company has been trained on that topic, you'll find that they'll find it easier to start that conversation with that person. But there is a real stigma around domestic abuse. I mean, I talk about it openly, but a lot of people judge me for that. And I think, it is a thing. And Nick there was very brave and put his story on there. There are a lot of us that are survivors and that are talking out now about this. And I think that starts to open it up. But there are a lot of fears, and clients will say this to me all the time. I'm worried about talking to my team. I'm worried about talking to someone at work, because are they going to judge me? Is it going to impact my ability to get promotion, or are they going to think less of me? But if they do start opening up and talking, it's going to be a gradual process. So it will be, just saying, look, we're here for you. There is lots of support available. if you start to throw in terms like, is everything okay at home? Are you okay? Is it working? You can talk to me about anything. That's quite a good way to open conversations up. But actually, I would avoid abuse, toxic relationship, narcissist, definitely. Taking those words out of that conversation and just allowing them to open up to you. But as I said, your rate of increasing their ability to talk, if they know that there's been some training specific and there's certain people that are identified within the organization to talk to, that will massively help them feel more comfortable, because that will reduce their feeling of being judged. If they're not openly coming to you and saying, this is my challenge, then you've got to tread carefully. And also, just on that, once you peel the lid back on this could be a toxic relationship, and my coaches are trained very carefully on how to show people they're in a toxic relationship. We never tell them, but we do a lot of training on what is abuse and talk about the sort of things they may have experienced and help them to join the dots themselves, which makes it what I call sticky for them. They'll understand, they'll come to their own conclusions. We're not telling them. It's very careful, because the trauma that is inevitably going to come from understanding that you're in a domestic abuse relationship is a lot for somebody that's not trained to manage. So again, that's one of the challenges with this. If you start pulling that lid back and it comes out, it's really tough. I mean, for anyone, I know I found it incredibly difficult and embarrassing and upsetting and angry with myself, fearful. A lot of things made a lot more sense, but it does leave you vulnerable. So those conversations I would leave to somebody that can safeguard and signpost in those issues. Right. I know there's a question. Tim, hi Tim. What advice would you give managers that have an employee disclose they're suffering from domestic abuse? They can signpost, but is there best practice on supporting employee and your own mental health? Do you recommend they maintain a confidential record of discussion? I mean, the legals, I can't give advice on keeping legal records and things. I know for a lot of employees, they worry that there's going to be a record about this, which they're very fearful of, and not just from an ongoing employment record, but if their partner found out, which may be completely irrational, because you might think that there's no way they could ever experience that and their partner would ever find out, but that will be a fear for them, which will stop them from reporting. So also, if you are going to, I know a lot of companies now, because statutory guidance changed last year, which was great, to suggest that it's a good idea for companies to have a domestic abuse policy. That's a really positive thing, because it will enable you guys, if you have a domestic abuse policy, to know how to safeguard and signpost to domestic abuse charities. Signing up with IDA's obviously a good idea. So that's EIDA. But having a resource for people to access in your company will make them much more open to bringing up, because they'll know they're safe within that environment. That's one of the challenges we have. People don't want to come forward just because they're nervous. And that's, Tim, as you mentioned, the support for the person bringing it up. That's, I think I covered that, but that's what we provide, because it's so important, because domestic abuse is not a nice topic. And if you haven't been in it and you're hearing some of the things that go on, one, it's going to make you very uncomfortable about what to say. Obviously, if you do our training, you'll have some idea, but it's not, it's 2 half days accreditation. It's to spot the signs and signposts. It's not to become a fully fledged domestic abuse coach like our coaches to support them through all of that. So again, you have to protect yourself and your mental health, because there are some pretty awful things that are going on out there. So, yeah.
Sara, there are a few more questions that are coming through. If you'd like to take those.
I'm just working through the chat. It's quite a new concept. Do you have any policy you potentially share? If you go on the IDA website, then they have policies there and they can help you with that. Obviously, I don't give legal advice. That's really not my remit. The emotional roller coaster and practical challenges of getting your employees back up and working and supporting your mental health first aiders. Okay, Sharon, a long-term HRD with a new company. I have a member of the team who's a victim of domestic abuse, which she's admitted and we provide support for. However, over the years, it's manifested into other addictions of alcohol. Yeah. By them, which has created a further problem. Again, this has been supported by a health provider, and spot having a period of getting clean and better, return to the same environment, the same symptoms. Of course, I want to support them over the last months. They've been unproductive. Yeah, how far should we reasonably go? Now, I hear this all the time. It's really difficult not to repeat the patterns. I don't know what kind of support you're providing there, but your normal counselling and therapy don't do what we do. I'm not saying that there's a magic fix for it, but they have to understand, and also the environment, if they're going back in, first of all, they have to understand what they're dealing with in enough clarity. Then what we do as coaches, because it's coaching, not therapy, and we're specialists in this area, we don't do anything else. We understand how to give them that clarity and empower them with very simple tools, which changes their daily habits and how they think, and actually takes them on a personal development journey to rebuild the way they think and the way they talk about these situations in a different way. That's why it's sticky and it lasts, and they have an action plan. They have someone to talk to who really gets it. And we also have coaches that have addicts as exes as well. So there's a lot of support in a community where we really can help you. I think if they're going back into the same environment, one of the hardest things is we can't help everybody to change. If they're going to stay in that environment, it's very difficult. But hopefully with the education, the support, and the community support as well that we provide, that changes that and they can get themselves out. But yeah, it is, because coping mechanisms like drinking are very common for victims of abuse, which is really, really hard to see. It's really, really hard to see. I'll look in the Q&A now. Lee's on. Hello, Lee. What is the experience of your clients to having a male coach? Is there a stigma? No, it is a personal preference. I find a lot of my male clients want a male coach, but there aren't enough. So we're training quite a few at the moment, which is great. It really depends. It depends on the individual. Some people want a female because they don't want to talk to a man. Other people want a male coach because they never want to speak to another woman as long as they live. So it really is a personal choice. When it comes to that, I think a lot of men that talk out and are brave enough to talk about it are usually comfortable with both. But having a male coach for a woman, yeah, I mean, I think you've got to look at it like the doctors, or, you know, when we go to therapy, quite often, you know, it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. And I think really it doesn't. You know, the male coaches that I've trained are super empathetic, really, really genuinely lovely people. And I think that shines through. But again, it's very personal with this kind of work, which is why I have my coaching hub with a whole list of different coaches, because who you might resonate with definitely won't be who your employee wants to talk to. So again, it's personal choice on this. On the domestic abuse, will Bell Tom currently on the betrayal domestic? What's Bell Tom? I missed that one. I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is, Rob? What are your views on the betrayal?
I was going to ask Deborah, because I'm not aware of the Bell Tom currently running. Is that a TV program that's covering domestic abuse? I'm not sure.
There's loads of them out at the moment. In fact, I've been asked to be an expert on how to love a narcissist, which is a movie coming out soon. There's so much in this field right now. Deborah, if you want to give me a bit more information, sorry, I don't know what that one particularly is. So yeah, I mean, give me some more information if you want to ask. On Emmerdale. I haven't watched Emmerdale for many years, but I don't know. I think it's really good that there's a lot more awareness. I think TV on like Baby Reindeer, it was a really gritty movie on Netflix. I don't know if any of you saw it, but it just took off. Anything with sort of the word narcissist involved, I don't particularly like that word, but purely because everyone's jumping on the bandwagon and labeling everybody a narcissist, and you know, it's not our job to label anyway. It takes the focus away from the victim and onto you know, and the focus very much needs to be on the victim, not on their ex. If they're focusing on him or her, they're never going to take their power back and rebuild. And I think the message that we have is that yes, it's really hard if you're dealing with people going through abusive relationships, because of the risk surrounding it. Definitely have a domestic abuse policy. You can get those from IDA. If you contact them, say that I sent you over, and they'll definitely help you. If you want to help your employees on a deeper level and give them access to the kind of support we do, it's super affordable. You know, we have different ways of incorporating it in your business. And we work with very small businesses and very big businesses, and including the government. So yeah, we work with all different types of organizations to support their employees. So we will find a way to fit your budget and work around you if you would like our support. But what we do know is that it saves lives. It's not just helping people, it is saving lives. It's very difficult for you guys to get into that. So having someone to safely send them and to take that pressure off you, but also have support from us if you need it, I think is absolutely invaluable. And also it's saving you guys a lot of money for your business bottom line, because the impact of domestic abuse on your employees' ability to show up and work, as we've shown, is huge. So for the cost of a coaching session, for the impact and the upside that you'll get is huge. So hopefully that's been useful for you guys. Rob, you're going to send everybody an email, aren't you?
Yes. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining today. We had about 40 people on for most of the sessions, so thanks for that. Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow up with everybody with an email, which will include a link to the recording of the session. So even if you've got some colleagues or people you think would like to also share this, then please feel free to do that. What I'll also do on there is if people want to follow up with a one-to-one with Sara and I, there will be a link to my Calendly and also a link to my email. So please reach out. We'd love to kind of answer your questions individually about your own business. So yeah,
and we'd really like to help as many people. Well, it's my mission to help as many people as possible. So we'd love to get involved with you guys and just help, and even do a webinar to some of your guys if that would be interesting for you. So please get in touch. Look out for the email. It will be coming out later today. And